Hello everyone and welcome to today's reflection. So, is it crazy to follow Jesus of Nazareth? Today I want to talk about our sources, the New Testament narrative. Now last week we were reflecting on VE Day 75 years ago in 1945. And on the television, of course, there were stories and reminiscences and memories and the shared experiences of people who lived through that amazing day of celebration and relief at the end of the war in Europe. All my life I've been listening to amazing stories. I was always enthralled by my grandfather's stories of the First World War, and being interested in history, I just lapped it all up. And likewise, I've had countless conversations with people who lived through the Second World War and loved listening to their experiences and their stories. So for all of my life, most of my life, I've been enriched and intrigued by these things that I've heard. In the first century, or the first part of the first century AD, it was the same for those who had known and experienced Jesus. They shared their stories and their reminiscences and their memories of him. And I want to suggest today that the tradition that we have of that is trustworthy. Now, there are those who would maintain that Jesus never existed. It's a myth, it's a legend. The problem with that position is that we can date and we can place the Jesus story. Let's place it first. Well, think about it. The geography is real. Jerusalem and Jericho and Bethlehem and Nazareth are real places. The Sea of Galilee and the River Jordan, they're real too. The geography is real. We can place the story. We can date it too. Caesar's Augustus and Tiberius, the Roman governor Pontius Pilate, King Herod, Caiaphas, the high priest of the temple in Jerusalem, real historical figures. So we can place it and we can date it. And more information is coming out through history and archaeology of the cultural milieu, the context of first century Judea and Galilee. And the more that we learn, the more the gospel stories become real and vivid, because that too accords with what we know about the life at the time of Jesus. So this is not a framework that is mythical or legendary. But some people will say, well, yes, that's true. The framework might be right. But given the time gap between Jesus and the church, perhaps there was lots of room and time for fabrication, for stories to be embellished. But there's a problem with that as well, because there is very little of a time gap. Because if we date the New Testament documents, and here we have to remember, when you read the New Testament, you begin with the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. And then it goes, well, the book of Acts as well, the history of the early church. And then it goes into all the letters, many of them written by Paul. And when we date the earliest of these letters, we realise that the major affirmations and beliefs about Jesus that the church has today were found already formulated in the first 20 years after the death of Jesus. Let that sink in. There was no huge time gap between the founder, this guy Jesus, who might have lived once upon a time, and then this church that came into existence with a huge gap in between with all these embellishments. Not possible. So the New Testament has that sense of authenticity, that what we believe today as Christians, right from the beginning, the first followers of Jesus affirmed. They are the ones who made the tradition. So there's a ring of truth here. There's a credibility to this. And when we read the New Testament, well, what comes across is the story of Jesus and the personality of Jesus in a very vibrant, vivid, vital manner that's quite engaging. So I would want to say to you today that as someone who on this pilgrimage of faith has had many struggles, even although I'm a minister, and perhaps especially because I'm a minister, a teacher of the faith, I have to return again and again to the basics. What is the foundation of this faith? What is it I believe? Why do I believe it? And when I do that, I'm constantly refreshed and renewed. I can say to you today that I have a quiet confidence in the New Testament narrative. There is no certainty here, because when we're dealing with history, we're dealing with probabilities, because we can't relive the past. We can't go back in a time machine to see what really happened. Therefore, we're dealing with probabilities. We're dealing with argumentation, not demonstration. But that's true of all of history. But I want to suggest to you today and leave you with this thought that when we're thinking about Jesus of Nazareth, then the foundation is plausible, it's persuadable in the sense of it has the power to capture us, to draw us in, and to give us that sense, hey, this has a ring of truth. But it's up to us to be open to that. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow. God be with you all.